was like the first day you went to school outside of the home? Like when you went to Little Flower?
I can't say that I remember exactly the first day, but I know I felt like a fish out of water. Well, first of all, we went to an annex for 2 years. We went to Little Flower High School, Catholic high school. And then we went to, first 2 years we had to spend at St. Vincent's Annex, which was close to us. Not close, well, a couple of miles away, and we had to walk it every day and back. I say a couple of miles, maybe it wasn't that much. But I felt like a fish out of water. I was very quiet and just looked around and did whatever I was told to do next. Because you didn't have anybody to complain to. You didn't have anybody to question anything about. You just did whatever you were told to do. So there for 2 years I spent at St. Vincent's Annex. Then we went down to the main school, which was Little Flower, which we had to take public transportation. But I always felt like a fish out of water in high school, but not bad enough that I couldn't manage. I did okay. I did good school. In fact, they offered me a scholarship in the home to go to a college in Maryland, but of course Daddy told me not to go because he said I would have been treated like a poor kid because it was a place where kids with money went and like a boarding school type of a college. And he said, you would have always been the poor kid. And I would have gotten mad, and I think he was right. I agree with him, so I turned it down. But as far as the reason we felt funny, I should say I felt funny. We didn't have the same kind of shoes as the kids, or pocketbooks, and we couldn't talk about boys like the other kids talked about boys because we didn't know any boys in our lives. And they would talk about dances and things, and we never went to them, and that's why you felt funny. But you got used to feeling funny. And the nuns would make us, they had all different kinds of nuns at Little Flower, different orders. And they used to admire how we looked because our uniforms were clean and our blouses were starched. And we always looked nice. And they would stand us up in school. What a stupid thing to do to kids and say, now here's Catherine Manning from the orphanage. And look how nice she does this herself. She does her own uniform and her own blouses. And they would point us out to try to make the other kids look as good as we did. But it was so embarrassing. That's the last thing you wanted to do was be identified. And other than that, I didn't mind. I didn't mind school. I did my homework every night. I got good grades. Then when I got to be a junior, the war was on. That was 1944. They wanted kids to get out into the workforce because all the young men were going into the service. And a lot of girls were working in the making bombs and things in factories. So they wanted us out in the workforce. So anybody who had a certain average could go in the summer school. There weren't too many of us. So we went in the summer, and I graduated in August of 44. Yes.
Sorry, let me interrupt you for 1 second. Aunt Kay, do me a favor and the microphone. So you had to press your own uniforms?
Oh yeah, we did our own. We always did. We did. We had a great big washer. There was a laundry there, and you threw your clothes in the laundry, and your laundry got washed. But you had to iron your own. And as far as the uniforms, we used to spot them, and then we'd take. They were gores, I guess you call that word, and they had lines on them like material, like this pants does. And then you take and press along that and make it stand out, and they look nice. And then your own blouses you got after the lady in the laundry washed them. There was a great big washer and a great big extractor, they called it, not a dryer. She would turn it on, it would take all the water out. Then you would iron your blouses, and we had starch, and we would starch them, and our collars and our cuffs. But we were in high school, big enough to do it, and we'd keep them. Maybe we had 2 or 3 blouses, however many, but they always looked nice. And the nuns wanted the kids to keep theirs nice at high school, so they used us as an example. And I'm sure their intent was to make us feel better, but it did quite the opposite. Because, and later on, after I got out of the home and got grown, I told everybody I met I was raising a home because I didn't give a damn anymore. But when you're young, you don't want anybody to know it. You try not to stick out, you know? But,
Were there any other ways that you felt singled out because you were the girls from the Donzica?
well, in the St. Vincent's, there were their sisters of St. Joseph at St. Vincent's. They were the only sisters there. And they tried to make the kids from the home come and shine their silver. They had sterling, of course, and help with their dishes and house cleaning and all. And our sister Carmelie, the head of our place, the home, said positively, no, you're not there to do housework. And they would only ask the kids from the home to go. Now, see, that wasn't good thinking on their part either. What the heck kind of thing was that? But they used to ask the kids to go downtown with them. They never asked me. Mary went with them a few times because they weren't supposed to go places alone. So those nuns from St. Joe's would ask some of our kids to go with them to do things. And but the nun in the home told them they are not house workers. They are paid because our nun paid the $40 a year for each one of us because it wasn't paid by the diocese. Ours was paid by her. And she said they're not to be housekeepers. So she stopped that. But that's the kind of stuff that they knew we were from the home. The nuns did. But we didn't necessarily tell the kids, and the kids only found out through the nuns. Faux pas.
Were you friends with any girls who
I made a couple of friends. One in particular, Mary McGowan. She was a good friend of mine. She played basketball. She went to the annex and she went to Little Flower with me. And she came in the home a couple of times to see me. She was a real nice, I think she was one of 10 kids or something. But she was a real nice friend. In fact, I just saw her last year and it was so good to see her. She was so glad to see me. And I was so happy to see her because I haven't laid eyes on her for years. But she's the one particular friend. And I went around with a little crowd, I guess, in school because you moved with the same people who had the same subjects that you had. But I never could get really, really close to anybody because I couldn't see them after school. I couldn't go at night out with them or anything. So you just kind of put one foot in front of the other and did what you had to do, you know? You had nobody to complain to. You know, there was nothing except doing what you have to do. Nobody seemed to care, but I don't know, I never minded school. I truly never minded school. But I wanted to get out when I got out to get money, and that's why I took the accelerated course and got out early. But then when I got out of there early, then the nuns inform you, once you're out of high school, you had to get out of here too. So I didn't have any place to live.
Did any of the girls who had to leave, you know, because they were 18 or graduated from high school, ever say they were scared to go
No,
out?
see, we didn't talk about things. That's what's so strange when I look back. We never talked about how we felt. From the time we were little kids, you couldn't talk to Daddy because Daddy was too sad. You couldn't talk to Daddy. And nobody encouraged you to talk. So you just did everything that you were supposed to do. Like that you didn't have any control over anything. And you just did it. But there was nobody to talk to about how you felt. And nobody encouraged you to talk. So therefore, you never knew what was coming next. And everything felt temporary, temporary, temporary. I felt temporary there in the home all the time I was there. I felt temporary when I went to live with the 6 or 7 different people that I went to live with. Everything was going to change, and it was temporary. Until I came here in this house in 1954, and it took me a good 2 years to feel that I belonged here, and this was mine. And it was almost palpable that I could feel it. This is permanent, it's not temporary. And then I had my kids, but it took a long time. I really felt temporary everywhere I was. I lived with some of the weirdest people, and that's how I felt in the home. Somehow I knew this wasn't normal and that it was going to end. But you never could plan for anything because you didn't know who to talk to. So you didn't even think all the way through about anything. You just did what came next. Whatever they said to do, that's what you did. You had no control over it. That's why I was such a booger, I guess.
Oh, tighter with the line. Okay. But that isn't even something you would say to your sisters?
No, because we didn't talk like that, and I can't explain that. We didn't really talk that much in the home. I was kind of a loner. And well, Nellie was too, I guess. Patsy had her friend. She was little. She always seemed a happy little camper. Mary always had the nun taking care of her. So you didn't talk about stuff like that. I used to get into fights and steal everything that wasn't nailed down. Anything. But you didn't have anybody to talk to because you didn't even, it isn't even that simple. It's that you didn't even know what to talk about. I can't explain that. But what would I have said? What could you say? Somebody would have had to direct you to talk about how you felt. And there was nobody to do that.
And you never had a temper tantrum and said, I hate this place or anything like that?
No, but I had lots of fights. Whether that was from anger, I had fights with my sisters even. I told you I used to pick a fight over the money that Daddy gave us. He'd give us $2 and he'd say, give each of the girls, each of you 50 cents. And I wouldn't give it to them. And I knew what I was doing, that I was going to get into a fight. And I would get into a fight anyhow. And afterwards I'd think to myself, you know, you had to lose. I knew I had to lose the fight because I was wrong. But I still did it. That kind of stuff, whether it was to get the anger out or what, I don't know. I used to follow Daddy around all the time. We didn't do much talking. I just wanted to know he was there and that he was okay. But we never talked about anything because if it came to my mother, he couldn't talk about it. His eyes would fill up. So you didn't want to make him sad. So you didn't talk about it. I think it's more important as an adult now, I look back, to talk about people who die and to talk about everything. Try to talk about everything. But it took me a long time to get to that point. So, I mean, nobody helped anybody because you didn't know what to talk about. Because the kids, you just were busy getting up and going to school and coming home and doing your job and doing your homework. And just each day ran into the other. So you never talked about how you felt. And that's sad, isn't it?
How many girls from the Gonska were in your high school class?
See, I don't remember anybody else but me. What those nuns did, they would pick kids they thought would do good in high school. I don't know whether we took a test to get in. We did take archdiocesan examinations. We did pretty good in them. We had a good education, I think, 1st to 8th grade. Then in high school, I don't know, some of the kids left in high school. See, some of the kids had a mother, and their mothers couldn't mind them because they had to work. Say their father was dead. Then somehow the mother managed, when the kid got older, to take the kid home with her. And that's what Daddy always said, what was life? When we got married, I pray every night that if one of you dies, it's the man and not the woman, because the mother always managed to keep her family together. He told me that all the time, and he's right. Somehow the mothers got the kids home. And that's what happened to some of my kids, but some of the kids in my grade, and it wasn't a big grade, I told them we didn't have that many kids, ended up in commercial, which was 2 years at the Immaculate Conception in Germantown. And the rest of them, nobody else went to high school in my grade except me, as far as I know, as far as I recall. And I don't know what happened to all the kids. I told her they had to get out too when they were finished school. And I just hope to God nobody gave them any kind of advice. They didn't even care where they were going. There was no follow-up, no nothing. And later on, when it got different, many years later, here they had psychologists and all come in there and talk to the kids. But they never had anybody talk to us. So I don't know how the kids made out, but I think I was the only one in my year in high school. I think so. That's all I can remember about graduating 8th grade. There weren't many of us.
So how come you guys didn't get to go to dances if the other high school kids were going to dances?
Thus, she wouldn't let us on. The nuns wouldn't let us go. They wouldn't even think of that in high school. And Nellie went to the dance, and I'm sure she told you, and I'll tell you, she sat on a guy's lap in a car and wrote a note to my Aunt Kitty, my mother's sister, and the letter came back because Nellie must have had the wrong address or something, and the nun read the note because they read your mail. And here, Nellie said that she sat on the guy's lap in the car. That was no big deal. The letter was not, that was the end of it. That's the only time they were allowed to go to the prom. That was the prom. And from then on, nobody was allowed to go to a prom. So, she wouldn't let us go to a dance when we were younger. But, I mean, you would hear the kids in school talk. Nobody ever invited us to go. But you'd hear them talk, oh, did you see so-and-so at the dance, when you... And they wore lipstick and all that stuff. And you didn't know much about anything. We didn't. Well, we soon learned. Then the kids pulled up their uniforms. You had to wear them so many inches below your knee. And we soon learned in high school that as soon as you got out of school, you took the belt, made it tighter, and pulled it up because that's what all the other kids were doing. And then they started making us sign in when we came home from high school. This is at home. And I resented that kind of stuff because so it took you 10 minutes longer, 15 minutes longer. What does that mean you were doing it? I resented that kind of. But that's the kind of stuff they did to us. We did used to go and stop and get a Coke, and that was a big deal. And a drugstore, if you had money. The nuns gave us tokens to go to school, down at the main school. And sometimes you'd save your tokens and sell them, and then you'd get money for soda. Or I would sell some scrap in the home. And we used to have these big iron things to hold the door stops open. They were heavy iron things. And I used to sell them, and I can't remember where I took them to sell them, and then I'd keep that money myself. That, of course, I'd be in trouble if I ever got caught. I never told a soul. I did it all by myself. Never told Daddy, never told anybody. So I could buy myself a coconut, or I probably didn't get as much as the damn thing was worth, because what would I know? But I don't know how I knew it. I don't know where I took it, but I know I sold them. I did that kind of stuff, yeah. Anything that wasn't nailed down, Kaye took. Even fruit and carrots and potatoes and everything. Give them out to the kids. Cakes, anything. I had a key to the storeroom that I bought at the 5 and 10. We'd go in there and steal cakes and give them out to the kids. Not that I wanted it myself. I just liked doing that bad stuff. And I hardly ever got caught. I got caught stealing a lemon once out of the refrigerator. And I was supposed to be the one who read for the Children of Mary Society. When you got, it was a blue ribbon with the Blessed Mother, like this miraculous metal bead. And at a certain age, you got into this Children of Mary Society. And it was a regular ceremony, so I was selected to do the reading. Well, when I was caught stealing the lemon, they wouldn't let me do the reading, so I never did it. And I used to eat the lemons just like that, too.
What about when your Aunt Nellie gave you an orange for Christmas?
No, yeah, wax orange. Yeah, we went out to we used to get 50 cents to spend, or maybe not even that much. And we used to buy stuff in the 5 and 10, yeah. A wax orange Nellie gave. She did. And we bought the goofiest things, those little tiny perfumes, cheap. They were like 10 cents. But still, we gave each other those gifts. And they meant a lot to us at the time. Or candy, anything. Yeah, we did shop. And we weren't, I don't know how old we were when Daddy gave us money to shop. We weren't real little. We were older. But when you look back now, you wonder what was Patsy doing? What was Mary doing? Even though you were all living in the same place. What was everybody doing? Thank God Daddy gave us some money every week. At least we had to get together that many times, and we went out to the movies together. But as far as being in the home, we were in different grades. You know what I mean? We each had our own kind of friends and way we did things, So we saw each other every day, don't misunderstand me, but not in a sitting by talking to each other.
Because when you ate your meals, were you assigned seats?
Yes, exactly. I think there were 6. Patsy says 8, but I kind of think there were 6, but that's okay. We had marble top table, pure white and pretty marble top table on ugly floor wooden legs. And we would sit there, and the food was served family style, and such as it was. And you had to eat. That's what I hated. You had to eat whatever they gave you. And I really wasn't that fussy, except sauerkraut. I hated sauerkraut when I was a kid. Of course, they didn't do anything to doctor it up and take the tartness out either. And that nun, Sister Mia, the pain in the butt, she pulled my hair again to make me swallow the damn sauerkraut, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And I vowed I would never make my kids eat food that they couldn't stand. And then my husband used to try to make them, and I used to fight with Franny all the time. Don't make the kids eat something they can't stand, because they made me eat the sauerkraut. Thank God I wasn't that fussy. I don't know what happened to the poor kids who didn't like a lot of things. But the meals weren't great, but they were nourishing, I suppose. Like we never had chicken. I never heard of spaghetti until I was married to Franny, I don't think, or almost married to Franny, or pizza pie or any of that stuff. We never had that kind of food. Of course, they couldn't make it for. But you wonder why we never even had chicken. We had turkey once a year when the Knights of Columbus gave us Thanksgiving Day, which was very, very nice of them. And we had a nice meal, but that was turkey. But we never had chicken. Isn't that funny? You'd think that would be an easy meal. And even spaghetti, you'd think it would be an easy meal. Daddy used to say, oh, that's Italian food. Isn't that funny? What difference did that make? But there were a lot of things I never tasted. I never tasted asparagus. We never had cauliflower. There were a lot of things that I didn't taste until I married Franny and lived with his mother, and she was a good cook. So I got to taste a lot of food that I had never tasted before. But at the times were tough, too. I guess I didn't have the money to buy it either.
So, can you do me a favor and just say that you were assigned seats in the, for dinner?
Oh, yeah. Didn't I say that? Okay. Yeah, well, we sat in the refectory, we called, where we ate. You were assigned seats by age. I think they were by grades. And you had to sit there, and you kind of moved up as you got older. Yeah, we were assigned seats. Not that your name was on it. You just knew where you were supposed to sit. Yeah. And then if you had to do the dishes, and I was just asking my sisters not too long ago, how the heck do we have to wash the dishes? Because we always use dishes. And you had a big bowl or two big bowls at the table, plus the plates, the knives and forks and spoons, glasses, cup and saucer. If it was, the high school kids got coffee in the morning. It was very good too. And that you had to wash so many tables, even if it was 2 or 4 tables. How did we stand out there, and there were only 2 sinks out in the hall? How did we do all those dishes? How long did it take us to do? I can't remember that. And you had to take care of the floor underneath where you had. And I think the jobs changed every month or couple of months. But I can't remember how we did all those dishes every night and got that place all cleaned up. And see, we had our big meal in the afternoon. And even the little kids that were still there when we were in high school. Then the high school kids had their big meal at night. So we went in and sat at our assigned places, and we would get our big meal at nighttime when we were in high school, and the other kids would be getting what they called supper, which was just not much of anything. Jell-O and cake. We always had lots of cake. Yeah, and we had lots of fruit too.
So, tell me about making the transition from living in the home to living outside of the home.
Well, it was literally going out into the big world, and that's what they used to say to us too. Wait till you get out in the world and find out that all the threats you got all the time. And it was really true. First of all, there was no place for Nellie was first out, and she only got out, she graduated in June, and I graduated in August. And Aunt Nellie had an extra bedroom because she only had 1 kid. So I don't know how Aunt Nellie and Daddy talked. I don't know how that happened, that Nellie went out to live in West Philly, and she wasn't thrilled with that either. And then came me. I was out in August. So the nun said, when I said no about going to college, then they said, then you have to leave. And it was right across, this lady, Miss Kelly, her name was. That's what they called her. And she had a room in her house. She lived by herself. So they told me, I don't know, I didn't have any input as far as I know. You're going to go live at Miss Kelly's. And that's what I did. Daddy took me over. And I met Miss Kelly. Oh my God. And this was, say, 1944. And she was already old-fashioned. Her house was old-fashioned, mind you. And I thought it was old-fashioned, and I was just a kid. And it was dark, and it had antiques in it. And I slept, and she told me this is a feather bed. And oh, she tried, I guess. But I couldn't relate to her. She used to give me prunes every morning. She had the breakfast at the table, a bowl of prunes and orange juice. And when I was ready off to go to work. And I was very unhappy there, but I couldn't say anything then. I didn't know what to do. I just didn't like being there. She was so old and old-fashioned, and this isn't what I thought the world was like. So I went up, started hanging up the corner in the drugstore where they had a soda fountain. And I used to go up and buy a soda. And I met this girl in there, and she started to talk to me. I started to talk to her, and I must have told her, I'm sure I did, where I was living, that I was from the home and where I was living and all. So she said, I'm going to ask my mother, maybe you can come and live with us. So she asked her mother, and her mother said yes. So I told Miss, and I forget, Miss Kelly, and I don't know what the reaction was that I was leaving. Of course, I had to tell Daddy too. And I went to live there in a very nice apartment. And I'm trying to think, how did we sleep? Did she have 2 bedrooms? Oh, whatever. Must have. I slept in the room with her, I'm sure. She had a mother. Her mother and father were divorced. Her father was a major in the service, in the Army. And she went out every morning to work dressed as a nurse. I thought she was a nurse. Her daughter acted like she thought she was a nurse. And one day, we went into Lerner's downtown on Market Street, where they sold women's clothes, and there she was, a sales lady. She worked as a sales lady in the store, pretending she was a nurse. So, you know, that's strange. So her daughter went home and took all her mother's clothes and threw them in the bathtub and turned on the water and kicked her mother into the tub. Oh, well, then I thought, this is very odd. Jean had a terrible temper. That's the daughter. The mother was humiliated. So then they went away or something, and I had a party. Kids that I had met, because in the meantime I had been going to dances with Jean and her friends. And we had a party there. Well, anyhow, somebody called the police. Of course, I got blamed for the party because it was too loud. So they told me to leave. So one of the girls was at the party, said, oh, you can come and live at my house. So I went to Rose's house. Well, that was another house, and I kind of can't remember even the street that was on, and I don't think I was there too long. See, I didn't pay attention to anything. And I lived with her a while, and they were another odd family. They had a bunch of kids, and one of the girls was married to a serviceman, and he was overseas, and she was going out with every Tom, Dick, and Harry. And her mother used to holler at her. Rose and I were the same age. She went to Little Flower too, Rose. So we used to get jobs together. I had 19 jobs in 1 year. It was easy to get a job then, needless to say. So if she would quit a job, I would quit a job. Or if I would quit a job, she would quit the job. So then her parents blamed me for Rose not working. So I had to leave there too. So then I had met this other girl, Peggy, at a dance. And she invited me to come to her. Oh, come to our house. Because I had to get out of Rose's house. So I went to live in that house, which was the worst of all. You walked into that house, and you just go along like Chicken Little. And there this woman is sitting in a chair. And you didn't have to be a Mental giant to know she was drunk and talking silly. The father sitting in a chair, this little man, evil looking little man. And the kids all happy-go-lucky, going upstairs and smoking cigarettes. That's what we did. Go upstairs in the room, close the door, and smoke cigarettes. And the mother would make fun. Oh, you're going to smoke your cigarettes and all this stuff. And then she used to make dinner. I paid them $6 a week, I think. She would make food, and then she cut her finger one time, and the blood was all over the potatoes, and I couldn't eat it. And Peggy said to me when I went there to live, if you ever say anything about my mother drinking, I'll kill you. Oh, I never said anything. I mean, but you didn't have two eyes in her head to know that the woman was bombed most of the time. And then they found gin inside the back of the toilet. She would hide it. She was really sad. She really was a sad sight. But anyhow, one night I woke up and there was Peggy's brother. I slept with Peggy, standing over my bed staring at me. Well, I got so scared. Then he ran. And I didn't say anything. And I didn't know what to do, and I was scared all the time. Then my sisters called me one night and said they were getting an apartment, the three of them. But they didn't ask me because they thought I was perfectly content where I was, because I never told them either. I really didn't see my sisters all that much at that period of time. And I started to cry. I said, how come you didn't ask me? And they said, okay, we didn't know you wanted, and they really didn't know. I ran up and packed and went. I was going with Franny then, who I ended up marrying. But he was happy for me too. So we ended up going over to Germantown and getting an apartment. And that was the best time when we had our apartment. So we really got closer then by getting together then, I think. I think that was the best thing that ever happened, to get away from all that. And it turned out later that I found out that this man had raped his daughters. And you felt evil in that house. Not that anybody did anything physical to me, but you felt it in the house. It was awful. It was the scariest place. And I just feel everything's temporary. I don't know what I was thinking. What could I do? I didn't know any options I had. I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know how to think right. I don't know how I was so dopey, but I was. But Daddy came there every month to see me to make sure everything was all right. All of a sudden I'd hear when there would be a knock on the door on a Saturday afternoon, and there would be Daddy. And I don't know if he knew. We had to know she drank, because everybody that came in. But nobody ever said anything, because I didn't say anything. My sisters didn't say anything. They didn't come that often. But they did come sometime.
How long did you live there?
God. May I say 6 or 7 months, something like that, hon. This whole time frame, all those places I lived in. Then I married Franny, had to live with his mother for 5 or 6 years. Well, another temporary thing. This whole time frame, I got out of the home in the end of 44. And do my sisters know the year we got the apartment? 44, 45. It was only better than a year, a little better than a year, all this moving around that I did. Because when you came out, like they said, you go out in the world, and literally was going out into the big bad world, and you didn't have. So wonder about the kids. At least we had Daddy, and we had each other, who came out of there and didn't have anybody. I'm sorry, honey.
I just wanted to stop for a second. Okay, we're on. So we were going to start talking about the apartment.
Oh, okay.
How did you even? Who found the apartment?
I think Mary started it. See, she just reminded me. I wouldn't have remembered any of this. She was riding to work one day with this man who was her boss. He would pick her up. Nellie, Patsy, and Mary lived with Mrs. Burney, and Daddy had a room there too. And poor Mary had to sleep with this little old short fat lady who snored all night. And she was very unhappy and she was crying. And of course, she got it out that she told somebody, which was great. So he says, why don't you and your sisters get an apartment? It never occurred. Never occurred to me. Any of us, especially Nellie. Nellie wasn't happy either out at Aunt Nellie's because Aunt Nellie was a cranky old sort. So they got the apartment. They looked in the paper and they got the apartment. And then, of course, I got involved and we went. But that's how it happened because nobody was happy where they were, which I don't blame anybody. So we had fun at that apartment. We really did have fun. Daddy came every Saturday, half a load on lots of the time, but he was cute. Then he left. Then he worried that he'd get home safe and sound because, of course, he never drove. Took the subway. The trolleys. But we took turns cleaning. I had a boyfriend, and so did Mary at the time. Patsy was going out with different guys. I used to tease her too. And Mary and I had Franny, Mary had Mill. And we used to have fights with them. They'd come, they'd say they were going to pick us up. We'd go out to Germantown, Chilton, and meet them, and they didn't show up a couple of times. Then they'd come over to the apartment later, and I'd hit Franny with a broom. Many's the fight we had. And then Nellie would start crying and carrying on because she wanted to sleep. She and Patsy had the bedroom, and Mary and I had these sofa bed things that were outside in the living room, I guess you call it. But we had lots of fun. Wore each other's clothes, whether we sneaked them or we didn't sneak them. We wore each other's clothes. Mary, Nellie, Patsy, Nellie, and I all were the same size. Mary was always the least bit heavy, and we used to call her fat. Isn't that awful? When she was a kid, she was never really fat, but we called her that.
What about
and she couldn't wear our clothes. Go ahead, hon.
When my mother took your...
Oh, I was going to get married, and she took and wore the dress. Never told me she wore the dress, and I went to put here, had lipstick on it. I almost killed her. I was so damn mad at her. Because it took me a lot. I either bought it at Saberly or one of those fancy Bonwitz or one of those stores. It was more money than Kaye ever spent on clothes. I was horrified that she would do that. But she was a bugger, Patsy. But you never could stay mad at her. She was always like that. She made up where she was working one time. That's when we went to the... Well, anyhow, while we were living in this apartment in Germantown, Uncle Henry came there once to sell us insurance. Well, we didn't care about insurance. We didn't care about tomorrow. And then the kids from downstairs, the two boys, I don't know how old they were at the time, but they asked us to go out, and we stood there and laughed in their faces. We would know more. We would consider them nerds, that they call today, nerds. Gawks is my word. And we laughed in their faces, and then they asked us to leave. So then we went over to off the boulevard at C and Eleanor, and we had an apartment there. And we used to have to do work, clean the place up, go to work every day. Well, I never knew. Patsy said she was going to work she said she worked in a bakery, and she had this dumb waiter and all this made up stuff, and I believed her, always believed her. Never occurred to me. Here she was fibbing, and she wasn't even working. And she kept saying she wasn't getting paid because for some reason they didn't get paid till so many weeks after. I always believed her. I don't know how she made out, but somehow or other we did make out. And we played cards a lot at night. Daddy came over to see us all the time. That's the place where he came and told us he was marrying Mary Reedy. And Patsy cried. She really cried. I was a little horrified too, but I didn't cry. But he never got married all those years. She was a witch too. But
Who paid the rent?
We all chipped in and paid the rent,
But if my mom was
Also, we just made... I don't remember any big deal being made. We hollered at her because she wasn't, after finally told us that she was making up. I don't know how we found out. She might remember. I don't know how we found out that she made it up. But you didn't keep that kind of stuff and keep going over and over. No, we didn't just do that. And we took turns doing the physical labor. Patsy and I did most of that. And we had to go shopping for food. And then we played cards at night, and poor Mary never wanted to play cards. She just wanted to sit there. Of course, we didn't have television or anything. She would read, I guess, wanted to read. We made her play. We physically would pick her up or bend her ear like this or something to make Mary play cards when she didn't want to. Wasn't that awful? She used to even almost cry, and we still made her play. You're playing, because we didn't like to play three-handed pinochle. Franny taught us how to play pinochle, so we knew how. She didn't want to play, but we made her play, so she did play. So that's what we did most of the time, because we were busy. We all went to work. You had to go in the trolleys in the morning, whatever way you went to work. Except Patsy, she went out. I never knew she wasn't going to work. Isn't that funny? Come to think of it, I don't know. The rent couldn't have been very much, hon. It was a nice apartment, though.
She said she would sleep all day and then get dressed like she had been at work.
Yeah, well, see, I always believed her. And never occurred to me that she was making it up. She had good stories. Yeah. She had a girlfriend, Margie, used to stay there sometime. Then they had this other little girlfriend of theirs who used to steal clothes like crazy. And sold them to us, and we would wear them. And I knew they were stolen. Pretty good outfits, too. So we would give this little girl, and I forget her name, money. She was a friend of Margie's and Patsy's. For these clothes, they were beautiful clothes. Nellie had quite a few of them. Nellie always got all dolled up to go to work. And Mary, yeah, she did too. I forget how she got to work. She had to go on we all had to go on the buses, so we probably left around the same time, but I kind of forget that. And then Franny and I got married, and Patsy and Rich got married. And then there was, I don't know when Mary got married, the next year, I guess. And then Nellie was left, and she ended up back in Germantown with some friends of hers that I don't know how she knew. And she was there for quite a while. But Nellie never called up much. You didn't hear much from Nellie after that, She didn't call much. I used to embarrass her into coming to Franny's mother's house for dinner, because that's where I was living. And she did come occasionally, and then Franny would drive her home.
How would you embarrass her into coming?
Well, I'd just say, you never come, you never call, and, and she'd feel guilty. I'd want her to see Mickey, And so she'd come then. Oh, I'm so busy. And she was, I guess. But I always thought Nellie had the world by the tail because she was single. She had a good job. And here Nellie wasn't happy either. But see, we never told each other anything. Isn't that awful? Never told each. We never really talked until we got older and had kids of our own. And then when I finally learned to drive, I would go out on a Friday night and pick up the kids, Nellie and Pat, wherever, whose house we were going. To Mary's a lot, and to Patsy's sometime, and to Nellie's too, I guess. Nellie learned to drive after I did. And then we'd sit around and talk about our kids, all the kids, and the cute things they're doing and all this stuff. And then we'd talk about the home all the time, and I think that did us good to talk about it. Because I always said I was mad when I was there, but see, they said they were happy as larks, and I always felt like the outsider, but I really was always mad. And I'd say this is wrong, and that was wrong, and that. Not that I could change anything, and not that I wanted to be bitter, but there should have been something done about a lot of things that happened there. But anyhow, we got around it.
Like what? What do you mean you think there should have been things?
Well, like the kids who left, and you never know what happened to them. They didn't have any place to live. There should, but I didn't think like that when I was young. It took me a long time to realize what the hell happened to the kids who had nobody. See, if we didn't have Daddy, the same thing would have happened to us. I know it would have happened to us if we didn't have Daddy. Those kids got out of that home. They had to leave. Nobody ever tried to follow up on them to see where they were, to see what they needed. How did they know how to go look for an apartment? How did they know a neighborhood to look in? How did they know how to find a job? Who helped them? Nobody. And there were a few kids who were total orphans like that. And you wonder what happened. Something should have been done for those kids, I thought. You often wonder what happened to them. I always did. I told him we met one kid one time, Nicolina de Bonaventura, her name was. And she said, if you ever see me with my husband, never mention that I was in the home, because she never told him. Isn't that a shame? I guess she was ashamed. Because those nuns didn't care about, and I don't mean to pick on the nuns, but whatever the system was, didn't follow up. And even the nuns themselves should have been a little more caring about the kids and what are you going to do and where are you going to live, and my advice is to do this, or put them in touch with some other organization who could have helped them. I mean, when they came out of the world, I'm telling you, they literally came out into a big, bad world that they didn't know anything about. Some of those kids were in there from the time they were little. That's what they're the things that I was mad about that they should have done, I think, differently. Not the food or the school or anything. I think we had a pretty good education. And we had a lot of fun. Don't misunderstand me. I had a lot of fun. Picnics and things like that. But there was too much that was never discussed that should have been discussed. And we should have talked more to Daddy about things. But see, Daddy was so sad. And he lived in a little room all by himself, and you wanted never to disturb him, never to give him any cares. So you didn't tell him anything. Unless I got beat up for nothing, I'd tell him that.
What about at Little Flower? Didn't they have guidance counselors? Or people?
Not in those days, honey. Not that I know of. And besides, how would I have been aware that I even needed one when I couldn't even think right? You know I felt different than everybody else. I was different than anybody else. But I tried not to act like I was different than anybody. Nobody would know that something was bothering you, hon. Like when the nun stood up and said how your uniform looked and it was well pressed, you smiled because you knew that person thought she was doing you a favor. Yeah, and you're embarrassed. You're very embarrassed. But they didn't think that way then. I don't think they do that kind of stuff today to people. Do you? Hope not. But see, you don't know what anything means. You think you're mad and you don't know what you're mad at, and you're probably mad because your mother died and you're living in this goofy place. You left the home and you're living in this goofy place, and you go out to place and everybody looks at you. We used to have this song. Did anybody sing the song to you? We're the girls from the Gonzaga home you hear so much about. The people stop and stare at us whenever we go out. As we go marching and the band begins to Y-E-L-L, you'll hear us shouting, the girls from the Gonzaga home are on their way. That was defiance. But we did sing that when we went out. Like when we had to go to the shrine, we had to go 2 by 2. Well, I mean, everybody in the neighborhood knew the orphanage was there. But as you got further away, it was, I don't know how far it was. It wasn't a real long walk, maybe 8 to 10 blocks. You'd be walking 2 by 2 and people would be staring at you. Because there are these people and these nuns with the great big cornets, walking beside them. It was very odd. And you felt different and funny. But then when we came home, we didn't have to come home 2 by 2. We came home by ourselves. Then we would come. The 4 of us would meet Uncle Packy. He was my father's brother. He lived in Germantown in a room too. He never got married till he was in his late 40s. Nice. He was my godfather. I liked Uncle Packy. And he would sometimes only give me a nickel and not my sisters. He was cheap. And then we would meet him afterwards. Then we'd go to see people. And we knew that they would give us something to drink or something to eat, or give us a nickel or give us a dime. And we'd stop in their house on Monday afternoon on the way home to Mrs. Brogan's house and whoever else. And she was a nice old lady. And she'd sit us out in the kitchen and talk to us and give us something to drink. And then give us like a nickel or 10 cents. And that was a big treat, to do that. So any way we could, we knew that we would get something out of it. Isn't that awful? But we did it. I guess most kids are like that.
My mom's, their Aunt Mary, I guess, said when you used to go to the Walton, they would take you 2 by 2.
Yeah, that's another thing. You went to the movies. Now, they were good about going to the movies. We saw a lot of movies that probably kids outside never saw, because he would invite the home, which was very nice of whoever managed that place. And we would have to go 2 by 2 to the movies. But we saw every Shirley Temple movie, because that was a goodie. The nun would look in this sheet and see if it was on the heck was it called? The list that said it was an A movie and you could go to see it. And Shirley Temple was always on there. So they'd take us to the movies. So not only did we go, the four of us, when Daddy gave us money, we went with the kids too. So we went, and that was 2x2, but you feel strange when you're walking 2x2 with these great big nuns with these great big things on them. So you get defiant about that. That's what I think it probably was with me. I was embarrassed, I guess that's the word. And you feel temporary. You just don't feel, you know you're not going to stay there forever, but you never know when the other shoe's going to drop. So.
What was the list for the movies?
There's a list. It was in the Standard and Time. It might still be. It's a list that tells you, there might be a different word, but it says acceptable, partly non-acceptable, and non-acceptable. They're not the words, but that's what it meant. That's how it was broken down. So you never went to see the ones that were not acceptable. But when you had to go and ask the nun if you could go to the movies, because every time you left the premises, you had to ask the nun, the head nun. You knock on her door and you'd ask her, Sister, we're going to movies. And she'd say, what are you going to see? Well, we had already looked up in the Standard Times. And she didn't know what was playing where, because she wasn't to that point, because she wasn't a moviegoer. So we'd pick out a movie that was up the top acceptable and say we were going to see that, even if we were going to see the one in the middle or the end. I mean, things that weren't acceptable then were, if they said, damn, you know what I mean? That was how bad it was. But we always made up that they were the good movies. And she never quoted one to us, so we went and see the non-acceptable movie. And we went to the Walton, then we used to go out to the Germantown Avenue to the movies at the Orpheum and the Colonial. So we did, movies was the biggest, but it was all make-believe. And what I always was, and I still am to this day, I never liked fairy tales, even as a kid. This make-believe stuff. I didn't like it in the movies either, like Andy Hardigan walking out of his door and singing a song, coming out of his door, and Judy Garland coming out the other door singing a song. I understand them. I never liked make-believe. I'd rather have true things. I never had an imagination. I don't know why, but I never did. I still don't to this day. I like things to be true and real. Like I never daydreamed that someday I'd meet a rich man and marry a prince. I never was like that. I was too much of a realist. And I liked stories like The Little Match Girl at Christmas time, because it ended happy, and it could have happened, but I couldn't stand ones that were imaginary, like Cinderella and all this. I hated those kind of things. And I'm still that way to this day. I don't have any imagination.
Was Little Orphan Annie a comic then?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Did we read the comics? Yes, I loved the comics. And I read that too. Yeah. Daddy Warbucks and and the dog. What was his name? And she had the dog. The hell. That dog. Yeah, I used to read Little Orphan Annie. I read all of them. And even then, now see, this is how. There was, what the heck was it? Flash Gordon was in the comics. And he was about space and all this rocket stuff years and years and years ago. I used to think that was the most nonsensical. And when it really came true that the rockets came, I couldn't believe that something that happened that I had dismissed as this so ridiculous that I didn't even read it. I liked the real ones. You know, I always liked real stories. I never liked make-believe stuff. I couldn't pretend to be something I wasn't. Or I didn't like anybody else to do it.
Tell me some funny stories from the apartment, because I know there are a couple funny stories in particular.
Well, the time. I don't know why I got mad at those kids. One time I was cleaning the toilet, must have been stopped up. I don't know what I did. But I was trying to make them do something. Mostly I was teasing though. And I took a strainer. And I had to clean the toilet, and I don't know why I did it. So it had already had crap in there. Mess, feces, they say today. So I took and did the thing. And I ran after my sister and I said, if you don't sit down in that chair or say, I love you, Kaye, I'm going to touch you with this. And I'd make them sit there and I wouldn't let them move because I was going to touch them. And I kept just like I did when I was a kid. I said I wasn't giving them their money. I made them sit there. They didn't know whether they're scared that I was going to touch them with it. I wouldn't have touched them with it. But at the same time, I had to do those kind of silly, ridiculous things and be in control. And that's what I did. And I'd say, sit down, or say, I love you, Kaye, only you. And then I teased Patsy about boyfriends. She had this boyfriend, what the hell was his name? And he used to come and take her out. He was goofy, too. And I used to tease her forever. I used to say, I caught you that day. He was standing at the door saying, I love you, Patsy, only you. And it never even happened. I just made, and I kept it up and kept, I told everybody that Patsy did it. And when she was a little kid, I don't know how many years ago that I said to her, the guy wouldn't let us in the movies for a cheaper price, for the kids' price. So we had to go out and get, I said, a larger ticket. So Patsy went out. I said this. Patsy went out and said, I want a larger ticket. And he said, there are no larger tickets. We had to get a big person ticket. There are no larger tickets. I want a larger ticket. I want a larger ticket. That she cried, and here I made all that up too. And I only told her that 10 years ago that I made it all up. But I used to tease her about it all the time. You know? So I did not, Kaye. I did that though. I did do them, tease them.
My mom had a lot of boyfriends, right?
Oh yeah, she did. Yeah, she was always getting dates. She went out with Franny before I met him. And she stood him up too before I met him. He came to the house to take her out, and she was in the house, which I found out later. And she told Mary to say she wasn't home. And she was home. All the boys liked Patsy. She was really cute. And so then he came up to me at the dance and he said, you're Patsy Manning's sister, aren't you? That's how I met Franny. Because he knew we looked alike, see? And that's what he said to me. Because we didn't live together then, when I met him. She was living that's on Worcester Street at that time. Then we got the apartment after that. But I had met Franny before, so I already knew Franny when we got the apartment together. But that was funny. You're Patsy Manning's sister, aren't you? He said. Yeah.
Sorry, I have to stop there. It's finished. This is room tone at Kaye's living room.